Yeah, let's start. This is a very complex film. It has two rather different narratives in it. One, which is the story of Joe, it's a very mature, it's probably the most mature stuff I've seen from Pixar yet. And the Soul World, it seems to be, at least so far, it seems to be more kid-friendly. Was it hard to balance those two sides of the film?
Yeah, it was. And I think that's something that we were aware of from the very beginning. Thematically, it got some adult material, not like X-rated or anything. I'm just talking about like, adult, like, hey, this is life questions that probably kids don't think about a whole lot. But we wanted to make sure that the film spoke to kids as well. And so throughout the whole process, we were constantly asking ourselves, how can we bring a little more physical humor here? How can we bring something that, attention or whatever that kids will find enjoyable? We tend to kind of think in layers where the first layer to lay down is more the impactful, meaningful, deep stuff. And then as we go through, we kind of layer on other things. So,
and I'll add, I think that it's important that kids do ask big questions because they're our future. And so that's why I love Pete's movies, is because they always lean into those big questions. And I think kids always surprise us how much they're actually understanding and absorbing from a film.
That's true.
I mean, it's also a reason why I like Pete's film before so much as well. It's the fact that, I think particularly in American culture, we can feel like we don't want to talk about these things because we don't want to depress or bum our kids out. And what I love about like Up is probably the greatest example for me, at least. I felt like it started out kind of dealing with death and still ended up in this like really positive, optimistic place. And it is a bit of a tightrope walk, but I think the challenge of kind of striking that emotional balance is part of what makes these films so exciting to be working on, because it's hard, but when you finally get to that point where we have the balance, there's a lot of high fives going around.
All right. Can you guide me through your process of world building on this one? How much of it was developed on the script stage? And for example, like how did you imagine Jerry? Like something so abstract, something so weird, something that has to be developed with artists. How did you, as writer, develop that?
It was a slow and painful process. The very beginning idea was, okay, wait, my kids and all of us seem to be born into this world with something already, right? It's not like we just pick up everything by watching other people. We're born with a certain disposition, with certain personality attributes. Where does that come from? So we imagined this place where we endow each kind of generic soul with specific qualities. And then we thought, all right, well, what is that going to look like? Maybe it should be like the ancient Greeks. Well, no, then that makes it very specific culturally, and we don't want to say that because they're sending souls down to the whole world. So it's got to be, from America to China to Canada, all around the world. How do we make it more universal? And so then we looked at some like world's fairs and pavilions and tried to think about, okay, what's happening in these buildings when somebody walks in, they gain a sense of excitement. So the building should reflect that. So it was just a lot of asking questions and trying on different things. And, I think there was a time for a while we didn't have any Jerrys or counselors. We just had a bunch of souls wandering around. And then we realized, they're going to need a little bit of like, go this way, go on. And so we developed that for a while. Remember, Kemp, were you on during that phase of the counselor development?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember having those first discussions about the counselors basically being the universe dumbing itself down for our benefit, which really contributed to the simple design of the Jerry. Because think of it like a scarecrow. To a human being, we put a scarecrow out, thinking like, okay, this looks just like a human to these dumb crows. But then from the crow's perspective is like, do they really think we're that stupid that we think that's a human? Yeah. That's kind of the Jerry. The Jerry is like the universe saying, oh, we'll make it human looking, but a human looks at it and goes, what on earth is that? So it's
yeah.
It's almost like a condescension on the part of the universe, thinking that just like, okay, here's some lines. Yeah, that's humanoid. They'll get it.
Okay, so next question is about the Earth. I noticed how Soul might be the most specific Pixar film in terms of location, because usually it's like any town USA, but here it's very obviously New York. How did you decide on what defines the city and what aspects of it do you portray in your movie?
Well, we did on Inside Out, we did San Francisco. And so we really kind of approached it the same way, where we went to New York, we looked around, we took thousands of pictures and analyzed the architecture, and even got into very deep discussions about the kind of trees that are in different neighborhoods, and so that could be accurate. The art department really did their homework to try to uncover the truth, like the fundamental truth, and then we would tweak it so that it would fit with our sense of design. So it's not just photographic reality; it's got a sense of style to it and a caricature. So it was based on a lot of research.
Yeah, and Ratatouille was also in Paris, by the way.
True.
Well, one of the things that was really exciting for me was that Joe is based in Queens, and Queens is a borough that people don't tend to focus on in animation. When they do go to New York, it's always Manhattan, and I love the energy that went into the specificity of Queens. Like Joe's neighborhood is pretty recognizable to someone from New York as being roughly around the Jackson Heights area. You even see the 7 train going by. So I love that we were able to do like this deep dive into a very specific part of a borough that you don't usually see represented in animation. So you can tell when Joe is in Manhattan versus an outer borough. So that was pretty exciting.
You've been developing this film for about 4 years, and simultaneously with it, there's been a resurgence in African-American cinema. And your film seems to fit right into this movement. You share certain common themes, common archetypes, common characters. And I noticed in these films, there's often a sense of community and how a Black person is always connected to their friends and family. Can you elaborate on how your film touches upon these subjects?
Well, I mean, connecting to friends and family, I feel like is a very universal thing. I really do. I think that, I think there's a specificity to Joe's world, of course, being a Black New Yorker, and we really try to bring that to life. I think you briefly see his mother's shop, but as later on in the film, you'll go to several other locations that are very specific to the Black community in New York City.
You mentioned the barbershop yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great example of one, and I think that I think I said it yesterday that by focusing on like hyper specificity, I think you find some greater universality. You know what I mean? I think the themes of the film are absolutely universal. I mean, a lot of the work that I've done in my career has focused on characters that look like me, but they've always been thematically for a wide audience. And it's funny, I've been asked that question so many times, like, how does it feel? How do you feel about an audience that's not Black, taking in this story? And I say, well, at no point, I don't think that anyone really questioned whether you had to be Italian to enjoy The Godfather. It's not a question that's ever posed to any of the very, very culturally, ethnically hyper-specific stories that pretty much dominate cinema. You don't have to be, Irish to watch a film about the Troubles, or Billy Elliot for that matter. English, you don't have to be any of these things. But a question, unfortunately, that's posed to Black artists is, do you think it's going to alienate people? And I think it's quite the opposite. I can enjoy Monsoon Wedding and Slumdog Millionaire without being Indian. So I think that, because these films always have universal themes: friends, family, passion, meaning, purpose. These are things that every human being on earth understands.
That's great. I've also noticed how Soul is complex, not also in terms of culture, but in terms of psychological concepts. I particularly love the idea of those lost souls and how you suggest that there is a certain connection between inspiration and overwhelming anxiety.
I think we were approaching it as the flip side of people who approach life with a singular passion and a drive. For as many of those people there are on Earth, there's probably 12 people who are a little more like, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm kind of finding my way through life. And I don't know where I came up with the percentage of 1 to 12, but the point being, there are a lot of people that I know who feel like I'm somewhat of a failure because I don't have a singular passion, which I think is false. But we have kind of built that up in our society as that's the mark of success when somebody achieves this success in a particular field. So, you know, that those characters kind of grew out of that fear and just looking around in the world and watching how people are, you know. I don't know.
I think the lost souls were definitely a lot of conversations were had behind the scenes about the lost souls, and this idea that there's a fine line between passion and obsession. I think one of the big questions we had was like Joe himself, like, okay, should Joe be a lost soul? How do we identify? So I think it's a really important part of the film because it represents the feeling literally of being lost that so many people out in the world have. And we wanted to kind of present it in a way that you can get yourself unstuck, you know, that it's possible to come out of this state and reconnect with the world around you and still, you know, have a life even if you are lost. Of course, we do it in a fun way with the Mystics Without Borders, but you know, it's meant to represent real things that happen in life and on Earth.
And you're right, like the difference between passion and obsession is a thin one, and the very thing that connects you to the world could also distance you from it and completely isolate you. And so that was just a very intriguing thought that we play with more in the later part of the film as well.
Yeah, it makes me think of Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys in his dark years. You know what I mean? Like when he wouldn't get out of bed.
Oh, that's a very specific cultural reference.
Yeah.
So one final question. I think John Batiste yesterday mentioned how this film has a lot of light in it. And do you feel like in this year specifically, towards the end of this year, light is something that we need even more now than you probably originally intended? Is it something that this film will resonate with its life-informing message more now than it could have been?
I mean, I think obviously going into shelter in place and all of it, I almost feel like we've all had to take a time out on our life. And at least for me, and I think so many people, it's just giving you time to reflect and really think about what is important to you. And I think that, not that our intention, we had no idea like a pandemic was coming, but I do think it, in many ways, it will resonate with people because it's going to allow them to just take a moment and I'll understand that, like, you know, the small things matter just as much as the big things, like going on a walk outside. We finally have clean air. It made me so happy. Just the little moments in life, like eating pizza.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Have a great day.
You.